You can leave your marriage without ever calling a lawyer or packing a bag. We're tempted to leave our marriages all the time. It's actually one of our most basic nervous system responses to flee. And that's why I want to unpack it as part of this series on the six temptations that we all face in our relationships. When emotions run high, we want to do something to get away from the feeling, to get out of needing to feel the way that we feel. And there are a variety of ways we do that and ways that we can stop and make a choice, see what's happening, see what the temptation is, and stay. So today I'm going to walk you through the second of the six temptations. Last week we went through the first one, which is that temptation to fake, to fawn, to try to change how the other person feels as a way of making ourselves feel more safe. Today we're going to talk about how we flee, how we run, how we try to get away from whatever it is we're detecting as a threat, whether it's actually threatening or not, whether a partner meant to be threatening, doesn't really matter. What's happening is at some level, whether we're conscious of it or not, we're frightened. So we're going to walk through what shows up as a temptation to flee, from the most overt to the most subtle and really highly defensible. Really kind of, these behaviors could be really productive behaviors. And I'm going to show you the distinction because it does get pretty subtle. And that's why I'm talking about this, because I don't see other relationship experts teaching people how to navigate these kind of subtle, squirrely areas. So let's dive in, because most of us, when we were growing up, we learned how to get out of a moment. We saw our parents do it. We saw them tell us, quit feeling that way, or I can't deal with you right now, and leave the conversation, leave the moment. And it's hard when you don't have it modeled and nobody helps you how to do it. Nobody walks you through experiences of connecting to yourself and your feelings, discerning what needs those feelings point to, and then advocating for that in the relationship while connected with the other person, with empathy for you both. If you don't have practice at that, you don't learn how to do it. So then what happens is, in a conversation, we feel threatened at some level. We feel a feeling that we're uncomfortable with. It doesn't really matter whether the other person is trying to threaten us or whether they meant to have us feel that way or whether we're actually safe or not. The truth is, a bruise gets bumped, and it might be a bruise that was put there inside this relationship or that predates the relationship. But we get tempted to do something. And today we're going to talk about, if that temptation is a temptation to leave, then it means that you duck and cover in some way. And the worst part is that when you do that, it invariably, rather than increasing your safety the way that the temptation purports it's going to do, it actually activates your partner's fear. So you did it to protect yourself, but then your self-protective move landed on your partner as a threat to them. So now they're in the same pickle you're in. They're reacting to you, you're reacting to them, and the two of you get into this loop of dueling strategies to get out of the moment, to not feel so uncomfortable. And it feels awful. There's not connection, there's not ease. And if that goes on long enough and repeatedly enough and intensely enough, you start to wonder, are you the problem? Am I the problem? Or are we just not a match? And many people come to me with those kinds of questions. And I have so much relief in knowing today that although my husband and I ask those same questions ourselves, none of those is really the answer. And the answer is so much simpler, more spacious, and more beneficial in every part of my life today, because the answer is actually to learn to be with the discomfort that naturally arises when you're living with another human. And that's, I think, the deeper purpose of this kind of activation, is that we learn to feel ourselves in a way that we might not have earlier in life. So what I want to help you get more acquainted with is your threat detection system and the things that your alarm bells tell you to go do in order to be safer, and begin to develop some discernment so that you can recognize when that's just a seduction, it's just a temptation. It's not actually going to make you safer. It's just going to pop you out of the experience in the moment. So this second category we're talking about today is really useful simply because it's so widespread. So I'm going to walk you through some of the forms that this temptation takes, and then we're going to dive deeper into each one of them. So check it out. Relationship temptation number 2, fleeing, might show up as divorce, the most flagrant, or might show up as distance, where we shut down or drop the topic. It might show up as disappearing, sometimes disappearing even like behind our eyes. If you've ever seen somebody sort of glaze over, that's one form of disappearance. It might show up as denial, minimizing, playing down the impact that you're having, pretending that something's not happening. Another way of disappearing. Or defending. It's like getting away from what you feel like is an accusation or an indictment of you by defending yourself or your actions, or sometimes defending another person. You know, if your partner's talking about your child in a certain way, you might jump in to defend the child rather than deal with the feelings you're having about either your own feelings or about your partner's feelings. And then finally, the most subtle one of all is where we are medicating, distancing, numbing, distracting ourselves with just simply staying busy in a general sense, or with particular interests like cooking or shopping or golf, or anything can serve to medicate us and get us away from our partner or conflict or loneliness, whatever we're feeling that we're not comfortable with and don't know what to do about it in our relationship. We can stay busy and just then la 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 la, I'm fine, not have to deal with it. And then finally, there are compulsions and substances that many people wind up using. And I've certainly been among them. My husband has too. When things were not feeling good in my marriage, I ate my way through it. So I'm going to talk about all of those. A lot of fun. And let's jump in with the most obvious one. When we talk about leaving our partner, clearly we might be talking about leaving the marriage itself. And I used to have this recurring thought that I now call the divorce thought. And it would come up and I would go, who do you have to call to get a divorce around here? Like what would be the steps I would need to take to end this once and for all? Because I cannot stand this. And as I came to understand the things that I'm wanting to teach you in this series, I got more curious about what was the feeling that preceded that thought. And often what I saw was that I wanted to divorce Kurt when I felt angry. It was my own anger that I needed so badly to get away from. It really wasn't him. And that's why the thought of divorce was so heartbreaking, was because I wanted to be with him, but I never wanted to feel that angry again. And so I would put the thought of ending the marriage on the table just as a fantasy for a way I could get away from that anger. And as I looked more deeply at it, I saw that my anger was coded by me early in life as dangerous. It wasn't okay in my family for me to be angry. If I got angry, things got dangerous. It was less safe for everybody if Michelle was mad. So I learned, don't get mad. And if you're feeling mad, question it. You're wrong if you're mad. So that felt really awful because some of the reasons that I was angry with Kurt were really legitimate reasons. There were real needs underneath that. So I had to learn to be able to feel the feeling, stay with it, discern what the needs were. And then, good news, I got to stay married, even though I still sometimes am angry with the man. So that's what I recommend for you, is look at how you can stay with the discomfort you're feeling long enough to discern what it's actually trying to tell you, so that you don't have to leave the marriage or threaten to leave the marriage or be in pain thinking about leaving the marriage just because you're having that intense, uncomfortable emotion. Let's look at the next kind of leaving, and that is distancing. This is where we want to shut down. We want to leave the room. We want to leave the conversation. We want to never start the conversation. So if there's a topic you don't bring up because you don't think it's going to go well, that's you distancing. If there's a topic that every time your partner brings it up, you won't talk about it, or every time you bring it up, they won't talk about it, that's distancing. So this is where we refuse to play. And we do it overtly or we do it covertly. We might cutely change the subject, or we might distract ourselves or our partner from a particular topic. And there are ways that we opt out of particular experiences, places, or sub relationships. For instance, you might say, I'm never going to visit your parents again. Now, that's different than saying, I think when we go to visit your parents, we need to stay for no longer than 3 days. Or when we go to visit your parents, I need a break every day. I need at least 2 hours where we're not all in one room together. Those are reasonable ways to meet your needs so that you can metabolize the feelings that come up when you're spending that much time with extended family. So, what we're seeing here is that when you discern what you actually need, then you can navigate complicated situations with intense emotions without having to just truncate them. Now, sex is one of the most fraught topics, situations, experiences of all. And many people have sexless marriages or near sexless marriages or marriages where the sex is really frustrating, dissatisfying, physically painful, or emotionally painful for one or both partners. And that's usually because, in my extensive experience, someone is not saying what they need to say about what they would like, either in the arena of sex or in a different part of the relationship. So sex often becomes, I say sex lives downstream of everything else. It becomes the dumping ground for all the things you haven't been able to resolve effectively between you in other areas. So learning to stay with your own feelings and honor your feelings as well as your partner's at the same time is how you build a bridge to where you can talk about any topic, whether it's sex or money. Parenting is another one of the hot topics that often couples get so in pain about, whether it's anger or fear or sadness or loneliness or guilt or shame around the topic. They wind up being unable to talk with each other about it. And then that often affects their sex life. So learning to stay with it, recognize, ooh, I want to just flee from this conversation. Instead, what I'm going to do is come back to my emotions. That's the key. So I want to draw an important distinction here, and that is that there's a huge difference between saying, ooh, in this moment, I am dysregulated. My prefrontal cortex is offline. I want to show you the brain hand model that Dan Siegel teaches. If you imagine that this is like your brain stem, this is like your limbic system where you have, brain stem is like instincts, like eating and fighting and running away. Your limbic system is like emotion, memory, connection. And then your prefrontal cortex is that smartest part of us, the most recent development in human evolution is this big brain that we have. So the smartest part of us is online when we're calm and centered, when we're in rest and digest. So you're being a reasonable person. This is who we usually are at work in the middle of the day when we're well rested, well fed, feeling safe. But when your nervous system detects a threat, when that look crosses your partner's face, when they say the thing, your nervous system might say, whoops, and your prefrontal cortex can go offline. If you get really upset, you flip your lid. If you're just a little bit tired, like 5 p.m., we're all a little hungry right before dinner, we're all a little worn out from the day, we need a little transition, a little relaxation. And if somebody starts a difficult conversation before dinner, before we've had the transition, it might take us from here to here more quickly than it would after dinner. So being aware of where your brain hand model is, how your nervous system is doing, how self-regulated you are, is really key to having effective conversations, being able to feel yourself instead of reacting in one of these temptations. But let's imagine you have gotten a little bit, your prefrontal cortex is a little bit offline. It's okay. In fact, it's essential to take a loving pause, to say, oh, babe, I love you so much. This conversation is important. And I'm realizing I don't have it to have this conversation effectively right now. I need to go self-regulate before I can finish this in a productive way. So I'll come back, say in half an hour, and I'll initiate it again. How would that be for you? You give them room to feel how they feel about that. They might be disappointed or frustrated. They might express understanding or they might not. That doesn't mean they get to veto whether you take a pause or not. You have to be responsible for taking your pause. And the agreement I would encourage you both to have is that if the other one does it lovingly and says, I can't do this right now, that you will accept it, even if you have feelings about it. Of course, you'll have feelings about it. And then the commitment needs to be that you will come back. in a timely fashion and in accordance with the agreement. But it might be that you can see, like, oh gosh, it's 8 o'clock right now. By the time I'm calmed down, we're going to be too tired to reinitiate this conversation. We're going to need to talk about it tomorrow. Oh, I'm out tomorrow night. I'm going to circle back with you on Wednesday about this. Just like look at when it's going to be good. So that's a distinction I want to make. And that made a huge difference in our marriage when I realized that chasing Kurt around, literally, I would do it all night. In my early 20s, I was bonkers. I would not let it go. I'd heard don't go to bed mad, and I wanted resolution, and I felt desperate if we were in conflict and we couldn't work it out. I couldn't sleep. I was just convinced that we had to get to the bottom of it before I could find peace. So when I learned from John and Julie Gottman that diffuse physiological arousal, which Dan Siegel would call, you flipped your lid, means you can't be reasonable. You can't have a good conversation. And they taught us the phrase, no more good can come from this conversation. It changed our lives because Kurt was then able to say that. I usually wasn't the one who would say that first. Still to this day, he's the one who goes, let's circle back to this. And I still don't like it, but I also now see the wisdom of it and I agree to it. And I appreciate him for having the courage to say it and the courage to risk upsetting me because I don't like it. But today we're able to pause and I trust him to come back. So we built all that through practice. And that's what I recommend you do. When one of you wants to flee, don't flee. Take a loving pause. And when the other one wants to hang on and duke it out, don't. Go soothe yourself while your partner soothes themselves and come back to have a productive conversation later. Now let's turn our attention to the third way that we sometimes leave. And that is disappearing while not leaving the room. We might still look like we're in the conversation, except our partner can kind of tell. If you've ever seen anybody's eyes kind of glaze over in the conversation. Now, sometimes this looks like they're giving you a still face, like they're being cold or uncaring. And certainly people do go cold in a deliberate way. And that's actually one of the other temptations. But also what might sometimes look like coldness to you might feel to them, this is ironic, like freeze, like they disappear somewhere because their nervous system is so dysregulated that it doesn't let them stay. They're like an animal that thinks, I'm not strong enough to fight this predator, and I'm not fast enough to run away from it. I better play dead. So their nervous system just sort of blinks out on them. That's when they disappear behind their eyes. So spacing out, getting less articulate, feeling sort of like dissociated or out of your body. These are all signs that you're sort of disappearing. You're fleeing somewhere inside. And it just means you're dysregulated. This isn't something anyone does to someone else intentionally. It's something that happens when they're scared enough. So what do you do about it? You find ways to keep your finger on your own pulse to know how regulated am I right now. And when you start to get dysregulated, you work to get more regulated so that you don't gradually wind up here without realizing it. Now, I want to look at the next level because it's a little more kind of subtle and insidious, and that is something that happens in the conversation. You're not spacing out, but you are talking back in a way that denies or minimizes or plays down the impact of your own words or behavior. So I put this in the category of fleeing because it's a way of saying, I want to get away from the accountability that I see you putting on me. I'm feeling blamed. I'm feeling mischaracterized, or I don't want to feel the level of shame that I feel when I think about that. Yeah, I did do that to you, and I do see the impact that had on you. I don't like how much self-hate comes up when I hear that. So it's often, in my experience, not that a person who goes into denial or the next one, defensiveness, it's not so much that they're refusing to take accountability. In some ways, ironically, it's that they are going to town on themselves and they can't stand the pain of that because it's unduly harsh. So it makes them unable to be responsive to the other person. So if that's you, if you find that you often get defensive or you deny what's going on, recognize that that's because you're overwhelmed by the feelings of it, and then back that up and look at what's your relationship with yourself? What is your esteem like? Do you have your own permission to make mistakes, to be human, to be imperfect, to have a learning curve? Do you have effective ways to make amends, to correct your wrongs and own up to them? Or when you encounter something that you've done that you wish you hadn't done, does it just completely gut you because you feel so badly? Because that's not a healthy way to relate. That's not going to keep you well connected. And you deserve to be connected, and you don't deserve to beat yourself up for your mistakes. You're human. So let's look at the final, most subtle way that people flee. And that is fleeing into busyness, compulsions, medicating or numbing in some way. So this one can be the most socially acceptable way, and the most, for that reason, the most slippery way that people flee. So sometimes couples will come to me and I will invite them into new practices for creating more connection, for deepening their erotic chemistry, and for working out their conflicts. And they'll come back to the next session and they won't have had time to do anything. And that's my red flag that they're too busy. They've got too much going on. And the pain that's been in the relationship, they've been dealing with it by staying over busy. And it could be both people, and sometimes it's one person that when they're feeling uncomfortable about something in their lives, they add more stuff so they don't have to think about it. And so they don't have time to be present with it. So investigate that. Just see if work or hobbies, sports, fitness, your involvement with your children, your involvement with your pets, your involvement with extended family or friends, does it crowd out the basic maintenance that any relationship needs? The time to be present with each other. And when you think about being alone with your partner, how comfortable are you with that? If that thought of time together kind of feels cringy, it's probably because you haven't developed the capacity to be with the discomfort that needs to get waded through so that you can have a better connection with each other. So that's my invitation to you there, is find a way to face that discomfort, even if it means working on that with yourself before you can get to the relationship part of it. I'm not here to criticize you for being busy. What I'm inviting you to look at is whether or not it's nourishing you. So there's 3 questions I would encourage you to ask yourself. Are you feeling your feelings? Are you having clear, honest conversations about what's really going on between the two of you? And are you deeply nourished by and present to the connection between you? So if your answer to all 3 of those is yes, then the level of busyness that you have, I don't care what that level is, seems to be working for your marriage. If not, then some of what's keeping you busy may be a wall that you're putting up between you and your partner. We can put up walls of words, of activity, of over-involvement, but those can all be ways to just avoid what needs to have happen. And I know that you might be able to have really good defensive arguments about why your kids need you and your work matters. And I agree. And I'm really busy too. So that's not really what we're talking about, is whether or not you're busy. It's what's happening in your marriage and what do you want more of? I'm inviting you to be honest about that. And then finally, let's look at the ways that you may be numbing pain. So for many years, I was getting heavier and heavier and worried about that. And I didn't see it as related to my marriage. But when I finally recognized that I was using food as a drug, that I was using it to medicate all the pain in all the different areas of my life, some of which I could name and some of which I couldn't. When I put the food down and stopped using it as a drug, of course, my body changed when I started just eating what I needed to eat to be healthy and have energy for what I do. My body changed tremendously, but also my emotional availability changed a lot. My ability to be accountable for my behavior and my words changed a lot. My ability to tolerate uncomfortable emotions changed. So that's why when clients come to me and one of them says, "Yeah, I like to smoke weed every couple days or most days," um, that doesn't really cause any problems in my life. And then they talk about their marriage in a separate way, as if they're not related. I say, "Well, I wonder what it would be like if weed's not a problem and you don't have any problem giving it up. I wonder how your marriage might be different if you didn't smoke for 6 months and you just put your energy into working on the marriage and soothing yourself or relaxing in other ways." And everybody I work with who really looks at whether it's how they spend money, how they, the energy they put into shopping for clothes or toys or whatever they do, sometimes it's even for their kids. A lot of us have these little side quests that keep us kind of busy, entertained, feeling good in a little dopamine kind of way. But they also stop us from standing right there with ourselves and being able to address what really needs attention in our lives. So I'm never popular for having named that, but with the people who actually take it on and recognize, oh wow, this is giving me something. There's definitely a payoff for doing it, and it's also costing me something. Their lives change in ways bigger than they could have imagined. So I love to talk about it because even if 90% of people don't want to hear it, the other 10%, it becomes a miracle for them. So those are the ways that we withdraw or hide in our relationships or are tempted to. And as with all of the temptations, the solution, the response, the way you can lash yourself to the mast, like Odysseus going through where the sirens were, is to always come back to your own pulse. What am I feeling? What needs do those feelings point to? How can I reveal myself to my partner authentically, vulnerably, transparently, and just stand right here in the flames of what I'm feeling and what I need, whether or not I think I can get exactly that? How can I just be true to myself and empathetic with both myself and my partner, kind to both of us in a I'm valuable and you're valuable, same as way. Not getting demanding, but not being a doormat or a shit sponge either. Just loving us both fiercely. So that's the answer, no matter what the temptation. And I'm going to come back next week and share with you more about the next temptation. I don't remember what it is right now, but we're moving from the least visible ones, the most kind of go away or hide or contort yourself, in the direction of more aggression. So I'll look forward to sharing more with you in the coming 4 weeks as we keep walking through these temptations. But until we speak again, I hope that this gives you some inspiration and that you look for the places where you have a choice point. If only once this week you could catch yourself tempted to flee and stop. Notice the form of that temptation. What particular flavor of running is most tempting to you? And rather than bolting, if just once you could stay with the feelings underneath that urge for 1 minute, that's all it would take to make a difference in your life. 60 seconds of staying. Every time you stay, you're taking one brick that would have been a wall between the two of you, and you're shifting it and turning it into a bridge across whatever chasms you haven't felt like in the past you could bridge with each other. It actually turns out to be very exciting, even though at first it's uncomfortable. So I look forward to hearing from you about how that goes. And until next week, may the light within you illuminate the world around you.